North Melbourne is a side that lives right up to its name. Players like Ray Borner and Scott Fisher are giants in every sense of the word, and coach Bruce Palmer is brutally realistic about where the ball must go if his Chargers want to win.
All of our strengths in the front line. Our backcourt, it's a little inexperienced.
It's that backcourt weakness that will give the Falcons a fighting chance. If the Newcastle front line can match the Giants' muscle, the likes of Al Green and Troy Trevelyan could steal the game, and Palmer knows it.
I think Al's having the best season he's had in probably the last 4 years. I've got a lot of time for Troy's game. He played for a good friend of mine over in Perth, and Donnie Shepard, and he was raving about him and sent a couple of tapes over to us. He's a very, very capable player.
The lopsided matchup should ensure an exciting game. The Giants may be soaring above the Falcons in fourth position on the league ladder, but even the super confident and competitive Scott Fisher is predicting a tight tussle.
They've got a strong backcourt, but I like our backcourt as far as putting on pressure. We've got maybe a bit more mobility throughout the entire line, the front line, and probably a bit more size across the front, but it's going to be a good matchup.
The City Centre Committee is to give Newcastle a facelift. Following in Sydney's footsteps, up to 200 banners could be erected in Hunter Street, the Mall, the Civic Area and Derby Street within the next 3 months.
There are lots of places in the Central Business District where it needs a bit of colour and movement. These banners we hope will provide it. We hope it will lift people's sights and colour their visit to our city centre.
A banner similar to those being planned was hung today outside the City Centre office in Hunter Street to gauge public reaction, and so far it's been positive.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I think it's quite attractive.
We were over at the lights and noticed it before.
Yeah.
It's really good.
To keep the ambience alive, the banners will be changed up to 5 times a year. Perhaps an Australia Day theme for January, another for winter, and yet another look for summer. It's an expensive exercise, but one the City Centre Committee is confident of meeting.
It's likely to cost, on our initial estimates, about $95,000. Some of that will be one-off costs for the aluminium fittings, and the other costs will be, of course, for each series of banners, and we're hoping for sponsorship for both the fittings and the banners, and we're hoping that from our budget next year we'll be able to pay a portion of it ourselves.
In recent years, gridiron has expanded to England and Europe, and many cities in Australia now have American football competitions. Newcastle has the Cobras. But this is the big time, with graduating high school students who are heading to various universities in the States on football scholarships, being the best in the sport. Idaho and Arizona will clash in the Down Under Bowl, an extension to promoting the game in the land of Oz.
Rugby's catching on in our country. I think it's just a game that will be an addition to all the football codes that you have. And I think as people see the game and learn to appreciate some of the skills, it can catch on.
But don't be misled as to this match just being a promotion. State pride is on the line, and winning is everything.
Oh, they're going to take it serious, just like, winning's winning, and they want to win the game. And tomorrow night when we play, you'll see the intensity level come up quite a bit.
Both Bill Cooper of Idaho and Doug Clapp from Arizona pledge enterprising football for the fans.
We're geared to do about whatever is necessary to win. I mean, we can line up and we can go and smash in there and really play what we call smash football, or yet in a sense we can be a little bit more of technique and finesse and throw the ball quite a bit.
Defenses always seem to have an advantage because we haven't practiced very long, but we'll put the ball in the air and we'll try to, show you some things that, normally maybe you wouldn't get to see in that, but it'll be attack.
Behind the cages and animal faces at the Newcastle branch of the RSPCA, a rift has emerged between the management and the executive committee. Management asserts the 4-member committee was trying to gain more power in the running of the branch before it was suspended in April. But the committee members allege the branch, which has a deficit of $13,000, has been fraught with mismanagement. One member, John Holcomb, claims the focus of those allegations is an aviary that cost almost $11,000 but was later given away. The committee sent to the RSPCA State Council a list of concerns about the management of the Newcastle branch. That list included allegations of the sale of society assets. A fridge, for example, bought for $899, was allegedly sold 6 months later for $350 to a staff member, and a waterbed bought for $200 sold for $30. The management of the Newcastle branch of the RSPCA was unwilling to talk on camera. But the Society's State Executive Director, Dr. David Butcher, said the alleged mismanagement was a thing of the past. Dr. Butcher asserts the allegations were being used by the suspended committee in a witch hunt aimed at the branch's present management.
It's no witch hunt, it's the fact that we believe that the management is not doing its proper job.
The Newcastle branch is being investigated by the Charities Administration of the Chief Secretary's Department. The administration won't say when its investigations will be completed or exactly what is being looked into. Scott Bevan, NBN News.
It is an opportunity up until 9:30 tonight for local wine lovers to sample for the price of just $5 up to 40 labels not readily available here. It's a prospect that doesn't daunt the hunter producers, some of whom are represented.
I think it's always nice to have wines to compare with, and they'll see how good our hunter wines are from walking around here today and tasting a little bit of each.
It's not a new idea. Wine shows were held at the Workers' Club for several years in the mid-80s. This time, products complementary to wine, such as cheese and cakes, are also on show. The concept is the brainchild of bottle shop proprietor John Baker of the Lambton Fridge. He decided to revive the idea of a Newcastle wine show despite the recession.
Good wine's not necessarily expensive. There's some excellent wine here, certainly under $10. And some of the expensive wine isn't necessarily that good. You've really got to go out and try it and see what you like.
Judging by today's response from both producers and tasters, a Newcastle wine show is set to once again become a yearly event.
The idea is it would be an annual show, and this will be the major wine show in Newcastle. And I think the reaction we're getting and the support from the people of Newcastle and from the wineries, I think will ensure that'll be so.
Each of the 6 rafts making their way through the chill mist on Lake St Clair near Singleton is carrying a section of 9 soldiers representing one of Australia's 6 army battalions. After a week of gruelling exercises in the rugged countryside, the teams are on the final leg of a 100-kilometre trek. Watching the final assault are battalion commanders from Sydney, Brisbane and Townsville, who've come to neutral ground here to support an event that dates back to 1949.
Well, the competition's been designed to stretch them right to the very limit, and we think we've probably just about reached the limit. But the most recent information I have from the people who are accompanying them is that they're all still pretty determined.
When these athletes hit the wall, it's the real thing, concrete and 10 metres high. The exhausted soldiers must climb it without forgetting their 30 kilos of equipment. This is only stage 1. In a cruel twist, the last boat crew home, and clearly the most exhausted, gets the honour of tackling the obstacle course first. The abseiling proves punishing. There's more, this time a test of stamina and determination. Despite the safety harness, the drop into the gorge below is unnerving. With the finishing line in sight, the final few hundred metres are a trail of torture. At every stage, the emphasis is on teamwork. After a final dunking, the finishing line is in sight and the soldiers stagger home. They're exhausted, but it's obvious how they're feeling.
Very good. I'm wrapped.
There is a winning team. This year it's the section from 6th Battalion in Enoggera near Brisbane. But the Army makes little distinction. In the words of one officer, there are no losers in the Duke of Gloucester Cup. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
Britain's most famous regiments on parade today are among those threatened by Tom King's Defence Review. But the wave of protest from senior Conservative backbenchers is not just about the loss of historic regiments. More, it's about the scale of cuts, which they say leaves the Army without enough men to do the job.
I do think, as far as the infantry is concerned, that the total that he is proposing at the present time, I understand, of 36 battalions is simply not enough for the known commitments that we have.
Tomorrow, Tom King appears before the Defence Select Committee, whose chairman suspects the Army's being cut to keep spending down.
We don't have the logic for the numbers that he's produced of ships or aircraft or indeed men.
This is the biggest reshuffle and recasting of Britain's defences in 2 generations. An attempt by the government to slim and reshape the military, which has been brought about in part by the reduced Soviet threat in Europe. The cuts will bring the Army's establishment down from 156 to 116,000. The RAF will lose 14,000 personnel, taking its strength down to 75,000. The Navy and Marines will lose more than expected, their numbers falling to 55,000. It's thought they'll get new ships in return. Senior officers who fought in the Gulf believe the proposed cuts will leave the Army dangerously overstretched. It's a view shared by former commanders.
Units in those divisions must go and do Northern Ireland, Falklands, Belize, be ready to go to all kinds of places, meet United Nations commitments, observer teams around the world, and so on. And while they're doing that, of course, they're not training as a reserve division. So if we wanted to do something like the Gulf in the future, we wouldn't have a trained force ready to do it.
Another chapter in the colourful history of Ken Cole was closed today. The fiery head Falcon says the side's owners left him with no option but to leave.
We moved here by choice and I'd like to stay, but the bottom line is that they've made their change and I'm out and you start all over again.
When Cole started with the Falcons, he could boast one of the NBL's best coaching records. He won the championship for Adelaide in 1986 and left the city with a winning average of more than 66%. But the magic wore off in Newcastle. 6th in their first year under Cole, the Falcons quickly nosedived into the ranks of the also-rans. This year they have won just 2 of their 15 games. Player support for Cole remains strong.
I feel pretty bitter about it. I feel sad that it had to happen like that. But, you know, things happen and life works in mysterious ways, and that's one of the ways.
It is a shock to me. He's just not a coach to me. He's been quite a good friend for the last 4 years, a very good friend. And I wish him well in everything he does.
Cole is known to be considering a full-time position as coaching coordinator with the NBL, but hasn't ruled out a courtside return. He says he's already been contacted by 2 rival NBL clubs.
I'd like to join a team that I think has legitimate aspirations of winning a national championship, and if that offer were to be finalised over the next couple of weeks, then I may very well do that.
The Falcons' assistant coach, Tom Wisman, himself dumped by the Gold Coast last season, was unwilling to comment on the situation. He's the man the team's owners have nominated as Cole's replacement, but he wasn't expecting to take over the job until next year. Wisman is contracted to coach the Japanese junior side, which is due to take part in the World Championships in Canada next week. Ironically, that team is beset by political problems as well, and it now seems likely Wisman will be available to supervise the Falcons when they travel to the home of the East Side Melbourne Spectres in 10 days' time. Bruce McKenzie, NBN News.
Although not quite a Loch Ness monster in size, a green turtle spotted in the Eraring Power Station's inlet channel proved to be almost as elusive. Elcom workers have seen the occasional bobbing head or flapping fin since February. But what was a turtle that's usually found in the warmer waters of northern Queensland doing at Eraring?
The reasons they're here in the first place is they come down with a southerly moving current in the summer months, and it's to their misfortune that they do end up in places such as this here.
With the channel's water becoming too cold for a turtle used to tropical temperatures, Elcom and the National Parks and Wildlife Service decided today to catch the shelled one. But first they had to wait for it to surface. And wait. And wait. But there was a plan to catch it.
When we spot the turtle, we go and jump on its back and try and rescue it, hopefully.
And how'd you get this job?
Only one for wetsuit, I think.
2 Taronga Zoo officers then arrived with their wetsuits, and at last the turtle surfaced. What's the plan from here?
We're just going to see if we can have a shot at him now. Depending if he balks and goes down, we just have to wait and see.
But the turtle disappeared without a trace again, and there was more waiting. The party was about to give up when the metre-long turtle re-emerged, and this time it was nabbed. Tomorrow it's bound for Queensland, not by the currents that brought it, but by an RAAF Hercules aircraft.
Roy McGann is a man willing to take a stand, or rather a seat, for his principles. While playing the poker machines at the Windale Gateshead Bowling Club yesterday, Roy pulled off what he thought was a $442 jackpot. Unfortunately, the club's secretary-manager, Roy's brother-in-law, disagreed.
And he came out and he said, I'm paying you $419. I think it was 50-something cents, but I'm not sure about that. With that I said, no, Max, it was 442. It might seem like a pretty insignificant amount. It probably is, but I don't think that's all there is to it. I think there's a principle at stake.
Roy refused to accept the reduced amount, preferring instead to mount a one-man protest. The police were eventually called, but even that was a move fraught with complications.
Actually, the policeman that came was my son-in-law, which complicated things a fair bit, and he went back to the station and said he'd get the sergeant to come down, so just wait and see what happens.
So is it either until you get all your money or you get pneumonia?
Well, I'll probably get pneumonia first, the way today is.
The 80-kilogram reptile was carried 2,500 kilometres down the coast on a southerly ocean current. She swam into Lake Macquarie and found refuge in the warmer waters of the intake channel at the power station. She was first spotted in February, but zoologists rescued her late yesterday after deciding she probably wouldn't survive 2 more weeks in the cold southern winter. Luckily, she was none the worse for her stay.
And health-wise she seems fairly good. No major injuries. Eyes are fairly good, which is usually a problem. And of course she's still quite strong, which is a good sign.
Today she was taken to Williamtown Air Base for a VIP flight in an RAAF Hercules for the long trip back to North Queensland and warmer waters.
That's where they like it, that's where they come from, and I don't blame them. Wish I was there myself.
3 hours later, touchdown at Townsville Airport, where National Parks and Wildlife Rangers took her on the final leg of the journey. It was a long day for this 50-year-old lady of the sea, and it will probably be a long time before she catches another current south for the winter. Alison Peters, NBN News.
If Bob Hawke invites George Bush for a tour of Sydney Harbour, there's a chance they'll make the trip on board Newcastle's South Stane. Owner-operator Brian McDermott says he's offered the vessel to the New South Wales Government for consideration as an attractive and historic venue for the diplomatic soiree. There are, of course, many contenders for the history-making harbour cruise, but the South Stane is easily the biggest vessel to carry a virtual army of news, security and diplomatic guests.
It's pretty large. It's probably the largest charter vessel around. Capacity is 500 to 600 people, which is the main advantage.
The vessel is still small enough for security guards to comfortably patrol. After all, they had no problems when HRH was on board. The South Stane was used by the Victorian government as the venue to host the royal family's bicentennial visit, and if it was good enough for her...
It meets all the protocol requirements that the various governments have to do. There's facilities that are needed, and the ship met all those facilities.
Those facilities include the most important room on the boat, a very private bathroom. A spokesman for the US Embassy said today he hadn't personally heard of the South Stane, but all offers were being considered.
More than 1,000 metal workers came to the International Sports Centre to hear a progress report on the wages accord Mark 6. The latest news is that not much is new at all.
We will be demanding a flat $12 increase for all workers so that the low-paid workers in our industry can continue to have a decent standard of living.
The Metal Trades Federation has reached an agreement with key employer groups and hopes to put its case before the Industrial Commission next week. It differs little from the proposal rejected by the Commission last November, a flat increase of $12 per week or 2.5%, whichever is greater. A further increase of 4.5% to be introduced in 2 stages if productivity can be shown to have increased by an equivalent amount, and an undertaking not to lodge any new claims during this financial year. Newcastle workers supported the proposal unanimously. The Industrial Commission remains the stumbling block.
We want to get back on the job and start improving productivity, improving quality of goods, making our industry international best practice so that more jobs come to Newcastle. That's what this is all about, and we can't have the Industrial Commission standing in the way.
If the proposal is rejected, unions say they'll consider boycotting the Commission.
We would have to continue our campaign for workshop by workshop agreements, yes.
It's a very important announcement for Newcastle, and that is that the Submarine Corp has bought Carrington Slipways, and Carrington Slipways will be reopened. I think that's a great thing for Newcastle.
At a stop-work meeting this morning, the Hunters metal workers couldn't stifle a cheer when they heard that Carrington Slipway's gates were to be reopened. At the Tomago Yard, the smiles could not be wiped from the faces of Ray Jack and Dennis Hadley. As the last employees out of a workforce of 450, Ray and Dennis arrived at work with heavy hearts. It was their final day on the job. Then came the news, not a day too soon.
I got the shakes first, then I phoned my missus up to tell her what was going on, and what's going to happen I don't know, but we're still here at the present moment, and we'll just take it from there and hope it kicks on.
After 3 months of negotiations, the Adelaide-based Australian Submarine Corporation announced it had bought Carrington Slipways for an undisclosed amount. The purchase comes only 3 weeks after the yard completed its last contract, the building of the Sea Road Tamar, and was facing a bleak future. The yard may look idle at the moment, but the Managing Director of the Australian Submarine Corporation, Dr. Don Williams, says the company is currently looking for contracts. He says once the contracts start rolling in, so too will the workers. Dr. Williams says among the contracts being sought is a $150 million project with the Philippines Navy. He says in the long term, the yard could attract Australian defence contracts. John Laverick, whose family spent 3 decades building up Carrington Slipways before it fell into the receiver's hands last December, says he's pleased the yard now has a future.
It's great to see the industry that we started as a family some 30 odd years ago continue on.
Unions and civic leaders were also delighted that Newcastle will have a shipbuilding industry once more.
It shows that there's still faith and we can do things in the Newcastle area that is well or better than any other area in Australia.
And I'm very pleased the Submarine Corporation is the purchaser, because shipbuilding will remain and that amazingly good workforce will remain available.